Question of the day. What is your favorite game by your favorite designer? Now, many of you know that I consider Uwe Rosenberg to be one of the GOATs, capital G-O-A-T, of the whole Euro Renaissance, right? I mean, one of the names that you always think of consistently doing good work. Now, yes, if your mind went to Bonanza first, well, then it's a great game too, but we're thinking more of those heavier worker placement games, the whole Lookout Games line, all that sort of stuff. Rosenberg is one of my favorites. So today we're talking about his newest game, Hallertau. But I want to know in your comments below, let me know. It could be Amerithrash, it could be European, it doesn't matter. What is your favorite game by your favorite designer? Let me know in the comments. I think that's a great question to find out really what digs you into your favorite types of games. So without further ado, let's look at this new big box. It says expert level on the box. It's pretty good description, but it's still beginner friendly. Hallertau by Uwe Rosenberg right now. So here's Hallertau, expert level. Seems imposing, right? This is a single player's player area, not the cards. I'm just showing you those, but you get a little reference card here with both pictures and words on it, depending on which one you want to use. You have your nice little cottage here that starts on your little slider board, your village here at 6 in the window. That's how many workers you get. Your workers are these blue cubes over here, and we'll see how they're used in a moment. You then put all of the different kinds of craft buildings here. You have the brew house, the carpentry, the bakehouse, the manufacturer, and the cooling house. This is the crux of the game, getting this stuff for this to move these along the track. As you'll notice, there are boulders in front of each of them, 2 spaces from them. So there's always a space when you reset. There'll be a space between here and a space between boulders, and that matters in a little bit. You'll get 6 of the farmer type cards. Now there are all different decks of these. I think there's 4 different of these and 4 different of the gate cards over there, which you see. You're going to get 6 of them. You're going to take your amount of workers for the round and sit them on top of the card for the round. So this is round 1. You put your 6 workers here. These aren't seen until they show up at the end of each round. So at the end of round 1, this is going to go into our hand. Cards can be played at any time, and I do mean at any time. The crux of the game is worker placement, which we're going to look at the main board in just a moment. Before we do this, the fields. Now, normally you would start with a set amount of resources. I'm just not going to put all that out there. It's not relevant that you see them all, but there are a whole lot of resources. You've got flax and barley and hops and bricks and meat and milk and yarn and wool and hides, all sorts of stuff, right? Yarn and wool are the same one. Forget I said that. But let me just show you how the field works. There is a phase in which you do harvest. So let's say I have planted my hops here on this field. Now, this is a level 4 field because it's in the 4th row here. 1 obviously can't be planted in. When you harvest, you're going to get that many hops. So I now have 4 hops. Now this is kind of like, what's the one? Fields of Arlo, where you kind of move these down instead of just amassing a huge collection of hops. You have 4 hops. When I spend 1, I now have 3 hops. See how that works? Same for all the resources. When I harvest, that field is moved down 1, lowering in value. Had I not harvested a field, had something planted, those would move up 1 each, and then you would choose one of the ones that moved up and move it up again. So now, using crop rotation, you're back at a 5 on this certain field, which is nice because it shows crop rotation, which is a cool system alone. Here you have jewels. These can be used for moving one of these craft buildings over just by spending a jewel. There are other couple things based on the cards you can do, but just know what that works. Essentially, you're going to be amassing goods. Now let's go through the phases really quick to show you what I'm talking about. You're going to retrieve, that's set up stuff. Move the current farmyard card, that's where you take that off. Activate your bonus cards in place. So some of the cards will say in phase 3, get this. Clockwise, place your workers out. I'll show you the board in just a moment. Take the farmyard card next to your stable into your hand. You'll have to look that up. There's a great reference in there. Move each empty field row up 1 and then move exactly 1 a second time. That's what we just did. Harvest your planted fields. We did that. You get 1 milk for each sheep that you have, so that could be a lot of milk, and you'll need milk down here obviously. And then simultaneously pay goods or jewelry to move craft buildings, exhausting tools to move boulders. In round 6, tools must be spent. So to move these boulders, you're going to gain tools which look like the ones out of the colonists. They're little tools that you get. You don't spend them, you exhaust them. So if you've gained 3, you won't spend 3. You'll say, okay, I've exhausted 3, because the next round you'll keep the same 3 that you started with. Cool. The tools are made to move the boulders over. Now let's just say that, and we'll talk about how to do it in a moment, I have moved everything over 1 space this round. Well, then I want to move it again. I have enough to move these again, so I'm going to move the boulder by exhausting the 3 tools that I have. And you could have more. You could have 5 tools. You could have 8 tools, it doesn't matter. Point being, you could then, once you have those moved over, you could pay the cost again to move them over again. Once you've moved them over, your cottage will fill in that available spot. Now we get 8 workers per round, and you'll notice that as you keep going on, you're going to eventually hit a window where there's 70 points in there, which is really nice to have. Anyway, you have that available to you. We are now at 8 workers. If I wanted to, for instance, let's say I had enough to do this 2 more times, I could move this once and this another if I have the tools to do it, and then move that again. Let's talk about how you do these. So first of all, in round 1, it only takes 1 good to move them 1 space. So let's just look. It's a barley more than a hop. So you have to spend more barley than hops. Irrelevant right now, because you can only spend barley in round 1. You can only spend bricks in round 1. For that one, for carpentry, because the more. But these are different. This is your choice. This is a bakehouse. You can spend a flax if you wanted, a barley if you wanted, or a wheat if you wanted, because it's only 1 good. Now, obviously, you'll notice that's going to get bigger and bigger and more. This one's one of these types of goods, any of them in round 1, either of those in round 1. Then you go into rounds 2. You have to spend 2 goods. So still, you couldn't spend hops here because it has to be more. But once you hit 3, you could then spend 2 barley and 1 hops here. However, in round 3, a discount starts. If you use 2 different types of goods, you can get a discount and only have to spend 2 goods to move it over, even in round 3. Again, that doesn't work here because the discount only applies when it's playing 2 goods, and you could not play 2 because you can't be more. Anyway, down here though, if I were to play in round 3 a wheat and a barley, I could only spend 2 things instead of having to spend 3 to move the bakehouse over. Same with those down there. It goes further like that. It becomes, you get multiple discounts. Now, when you gain a sheep in a round, you see this arrow? If you gain a sheep in round 1, they go to this card. Sheep in round 2 here. Same here, they go down here. If a sheep is ever on a card, when that card gets picked up and moved, you lose the sheep. If you can do it, there are ways to move the sheep up the rows. Now, there are a whole lot of types of cards. Some of these market cards are things that allow you to gain resources in round 3. That's typically what the market cards do, provide resources for you in that round 3 income phase. You have in-game scoring, which are things like this, that you'll start with one of these, spend 6 wheats and spend 6 hops. This means if you have it, you gain that. So essentially they're kind of conditional benefits is what that means. The farmer cards are the same thing. Some of them will say spend, some of them will say if you have, but usually the gates are the ones that are if you have, do this. So they're a lot better in the sense that you don't have to spend it, and a lot of cards will give you bonuses of more cards down here in the bottom right. Let's take a look at the actions really quick, and then we will wrap this thing up. So hold a bunch of different actions here. Notice there's 1, 2, and 3 on each of the spaces except the 4 card spaces. These are places where you can go to draw cards other than getting them throughout the regular actions. You also gain the first player marker if you take these. Now, if someone's here, and the game will start with some already on the board, if someone's here, I would have to pay the next lowest cost. So if somebody's at 1, I would have to pay 2 workers here, which is why you want to amass more workers. Let's quickly go through the actions here. Spend 2 or 4 milk to gain 1 or 2 sheep. This is gain a wool per sheep plus a sheep gains around. That's what I was talking about, moving that sheep up a space to save it. I'm not going to go through all these. These are planting fields. Essentially, you can plant on 4 different fields, move 1, get a new field to level 5. So those 4 are planting. These on the outside typically give you bricks here. This one's just a sheep market. It's a sheep and a wool. It's kind of not the greatest action. Same with the weekly market down here. However, you can take the sheep and slaughter it to get 4 meat and 2 hide here. So those are the actions. They're very simple, very straightforward. There's not a lot of feast for Odin about, you're hunting for whales or whatever, but that is how you play Hallertau. The game ends after all 6 rounds. You amass the points, 1 point per every 5 fields, goods, and tools. Person with the most points wins the game. So that's how you play Hallertau. First and foremost, I love the way this one looks. All of his worker placement games manage to look good on the table. They have some interesting ideas about them. This one, I love that giant cottage just rolls down the line, right? And whatever you have in the window, that's how many workers you get. You're moving those craft buildings to move further up and get more and more points. So if you look at the game top down, it looks great from all the different resource types, right? Barley, hops, all that sort of stuff. Not to mention the field. I love the field, the way it looks. I just like the way this looks as a Euro game. It's top down, old school worker placement Euro, but it doesn't feel dry or bland or boring. I also like the art direction. I feel like the cards, the images, the icons, everything about this game really flows iconography wise. There's nothing where you look at it and go, wonder what that means, and then you open up a book and find out that it's something completely different than what you had thought. I think this one does a really good job of using its art direction to really give you the information that you need on the tile, on the card, on the action, whatever. So art direction looks great. It's a great looking Euro game. Got a lot of great wooden bits. I'm a sucker for those shaped wooden bits. I think this one does it really well. So art direction, love this one. Now let's talk gameplay, because that's really what you're here for. I will say this statement up front. This is my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game. It beats Caverna, it beats Agricola, it beats Le Havre for me. I know that's a big one. It beats Feast for Odin for me. I think this one does what all of those do similarly in touch points from them, but in my opinion, it does it just so perfectly on its own. For instance, I like the idea of multiple workers, kind of like Feast for Odin, where if you're the first one there, it's only one worker. Second's two, third is three. I like that, right? I like the idea that there are multiple ways to get what you need based on the board. But not only that, let's talk about the fields for a minute. The field mechanic has been in other games. I love the way the field rotation, crop rotation works. Yes, you have fields. You don't have to necessarily plant all of them. You start with 3, but if you don't plant on a field, it moves up in value. If you do plant on a field, it goes down in value. That crop rotation mechanic is so sound and so smart. It's one of the best to me. I really, really enjoy that. So crop-wise, it's my favorite of his games when it comes to fields and farms and things like that. As far as animals and plants and stuff like that, there's not a ton of animal work here. There's just sheep, and they provide milk. Now, what I love is you know your goal at the end of the round. Your goal is not to hopefully have more resources than the other person in 3 turns so that you can end up doing all the actions you need to take first place. No, you need to move your cottage up every single round as far as you can go. It doesn't matter what the other person does, as long as they don't block your spot and you have enough workers left. You need to get that up as fast as you can, as far as you can, to get the most points that you can. Now, that may involve you using and manipulating the cards some to get more resources. I think the card mechanic in this one is better than Agricola, because even though there's still a lot of, really great risk reward in the cards, that some of them are fantastic, some of them are it's not as linchpin. It's not as if you don't play these cards, if you don't get the best cards, then you're going to lose. It's not quite like that. Whereas you can have a terrible hand of cards and still come out ahead as long as you play strategically around it. So there are multiple ways to come ahead in this game. At the end of the day, I think this is his best work to date. I really love it. It's so good. You don't have to worry about the hardness of trying to feed your family or anything like that. You don't have to worry about animal breeding or anything like that. You're doing what you need to do to take care of these 5 parameters as much as you can, plus moving the stones over. And it really just works. At the end of the day, great game. If you haven't played Hallertau, go check it out. If you have played it, tell me what you think of it in the comments below. If you're a fan of Rosenberg's other works, you're going to love this one, hands down, 100%. If you don't love Rosenberg's works, this one still works, in my opinion. I think you can introduce people to this who are worker placement fans, and they'll pick it up and enjoy it no matter what. So I can't say enough good things about Hallertau. Go check it out. Go play it. It's my favorite of his works. Love this game so very much. So I'm Bryan Drake here on the Dice Tower. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Dice Tower Bryan. Until next time, we'll see you.